Trade, Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainable Development branch of UN Trade and Development. And the reason that we are here at the third UN Ocean Conference is because UNCTAD has a strong program on sustainable ocean economies, which is a great opportunity for developing countries. So the ocean economy is basically a sector of opportunity for developing countries, but it also one is at risk with climate change for developing countries. And therefore, this is one of the priorities that my program has identified. We have 5 units. One is trade and climate, one is trade and ocean economy, one is trade and biodiversity, one is national green export strategy, which we do with ECA and within the concept of the context of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And the fifth one is sustainable manufacturing and circular economy that you benefit from when you were in Zanzibar, where we have our cement project. So these are the 5. On the ocean side, we have piloted ocean sustainable economy project in the Caribbean, based on our blue biotrade principles and criteria that are in response to the Convention on Biodiversity that ensure benefit sharing, respect of the environmental laws, conservation of biodiversity, sustainable livelihood. So basically, we have all this background, and we just published in July, beginning of July, the Global Trade Update, which is on the ocean, trade in the ocean. We produce a lot of data on that, because a lot of time these data is missing for developing countries. So we've developed database on trade and ocean economy, trade and non-plastic substitute, trade and biodiversity, to help developing countries take advantage of these issues. And finally, the reason we are here is and so we have several side events. We supported our Secretary General who spoke at the Ocean Action Panel 6. We also have a pavilion in the Green Zone in partnership with France, Portugal, Angola, and UK, where we add several sessions more for the general public in the Green Pavilion.
First of all, let's go to the issues to do with plastic and substitution, or getting other materials to substitute plastic. This is okay, it might work in the West, but in developing countries, and especially in East Africa, where I come from, it's quite a challenge. How do you think that will happen? How do you think that will be actualized?
So, as you know, within the INC negotiation, there is now language in non-plastic substitute. This is language that was incorporated with UNCTAD with the member states, because non-plastic substitutes can come from bamboo, they can come from banana leaf, they can come from pineapple leaf, they can come. So, as part of the circular economy work that we do, something that now goes as to waste, like the leaves of the banana, the leaves of the pineapple, and get burned, emitting more CO2, could actually be reused and produce non-plastic substitute. Also, seaweed have a huge potential in trade to substitute for the film of plastic that you use for food trade. A lot of seaweed can be used actually for this to support the trade of food. These are areas where developing countries have a competitive advantage, and therefore UNCTAD is looking at what are the regulatory constraints and standards that would be needed. For instance, tariff on agriculture are way higher than the tariff on industrial good. Therefore, those tariffs, the non-plastic substitute, would face higher tariff. How do we address that if we want to achieve the INC, right? Also, some of the seaweed substitute, they still meet the same phytosanitary standard, even if they're not going to be used in food. If you're going to use them for packaging of something else, then if they were to be used in food, why would we have those standards? So we should be agreeing on a codex alimentarius or a code of standard, so that developing countries are not facing unfair restriction on their trade where they have a competitive advantage.
It's good that mentioned unfair restrictions. Transitioning from plastics to this other safe
Substitute.
safe substitute is not easy, especially for countries that are already struggling. How are you going to help them actualize that?
What we're doing it through three ways. One is technical cooperation, offering. So we have the ocean sustainable strategy that we piloted in Barbados, and this is ready to be rolled out everywhere. We have we've helping several countries in Africa with their non-plastic substitute regulation. So technical cooperation on the science-based policy making. We're also working within UNCTAD consensus building with our member state to advance, to have discussion about these issues and advance these issues so they can benefit developing countries.
Are there examples maybe in Africa or East Africa whereby you've stepped in to help?
Yes, but I can't remember. Could you get me the example where we just helped in Africa for their policies on non-plastic substitute?
That she can share later.
Yeah.
Okay, now moving on to plastics. We had an announcement at the beginning of the conference, the Miss announcement on plastics. There are countries that have not signed, and I believe my country hasn't signed yet, Kenya. Is it possible to get a list of countries that have signed it as of now? Because I understand the list is updated. It's being updated until the conference.
The convention, yeah. I think this is an initiative led by France and several other countries, and therefore I do not have that list, but we will try to get it because France is a great partner on these issues. And then we will be, it doesn't, I mean, it's great that what France is doing is supporting multilateralism so that when we get to August in Geneva for we hope the last negotiation on plastic agreement, that there's going to be enough countries that will be joining so that we can have an agreement. Because remember, it's not like the fisheries agreement or the BBNJ. There's no agreement yet. The agreements still need to be made. So what France is doing now is ocean diplomacy here, so that we can make sure that when we get to, as you know, there's the big issue for the negotiation on plastic is whether we want to reduce the production of plastic or do we only try to regulate it. And then we're saying we need to increase it, we need to do both. We need to find non-plastic substitute to reduce the use because there's a legacy amount, as you know, because your country, you can see it as you walk around. There's legacy plastic that we'll have to take care of as well.
Okay. I believe maybe you've had a glimpse of the discussions during the agreement. Why do you think some countries are reluctant to sign this agreement?
Well, plastic is made of fossil fuel, right? So if you're a major fossil fuel producer, maybe you've been diversifying from fossil fuel to plastic because as you see that renewable energy now is getting cheaper in most places, that this is another area. So therefore, if I'm producing fossil fuel as a country and I don't have alternative, and now I'm going to plastic, and then it's going to be difficult for me to accept that I'm not compensated because that's my production of plastic, right? So how do we compensate those countries that have been investing in this, especially if they're developing countries and there are few other alternatives. So this is what I think we need to address now.
So mostly it's about the compensation part. Some countries believe that maybe they need compensation to transit because they invested so much into this.
It's basically to ensure a just transition. There's a lot of people that are hired in this sector. How do we give enough, what's the time is given for them to be upskilled, reskilled, hired in another sector so that these people do not go, without job and without feeding their family overnight. So I think this is where I think the discussion needs to go.
Okay, talking about the BBNJ treaty, we're talking about countries now will have the mandate to protect areas that are way beyond their boundaries. But already, there are countries that are struggling to protect whatever it is they have, like the country I live in. Any developing countries have that. How is this realistic for these countries?
Yeah, I think because it is true that developing countries are struggling to actually have the data and monitor their own area. I think we think at UNCTAD that the technology we're going to have to develop with satellite imagery and all the technology that will be needed to protect the high seas, which are massive, right? 50% of the planet, will be, I think that will be reducing the cost of overall doing the monitoring, which then means that the coastal developing countries will have a cheaper way to monitor their own coast. Second, I think it's going to increase the collaboration amongst the member states to do so. So I don't think we're going to put the burden on developing countries, on Kenya, to have to go and protect the high sea, right? But then everybody, because this is humanity's common good, everybody should benefit from whatever is extracted from the high seas, and that means that Kenya could benefit from the high seas, because now we're gonna have to develop a management plan and a benefit sharing plan for what's gonna extract it from the high seas.
Okay.
That right now there's already people fishing, extracting, and nobody benefits, right? So at least it would give a framework within which this is gonna happen.
I believe this technology will also come from the developed world. The issue will be trust. How sure will these developing countries be? How sure can they be that whatever data they'll be receiving from this already developed country will be the actual one?
Yeah.
And will they be accessible to this data without any limit?
I think that's a very good question, and I don't think it should be that you depend on that data. I think it should be that the technology needs to be transferred to your country at an affordable cost, and you need to be able to do your own analysis yourself. It shouldn't be that you depend on developed countries to do your management. I mean, this is sovereignty of countries, right? And it's not the way it's always been done, but that's the way it should be done. And this is something that UNCTAD will be really pushing for.
Okay. On blue economy, Africa, any developing world is already struggling to actualize the potential of their blue economy. How is UNCTAD working to ensure that these countries, like Kenya for instance, or East Africa, actualize their potential in this area?
We're doing it several ways. One is we build these database so that you actually know what's the trade, in what fishes get traded, where, by whom, what's the prices, along with our colleague at FAO. But the trade side, that's what we do. Then we help you identify what are the areas. For instance, is in Barbados and the Caribbean. We help them identify what are the species of interest for them. Then what are the standards? And then how do you make sure it's sustainably harvested so that you're not going to face market access problem down the road. And then basically also, how can you collaborate with your neighbors in South-South trade? So maybe you don't have necessarily the capacity to process the food nationally, maybe not Kenya, because Kenya probably have the capacity, but smaller country may not have the capacity to process. So perhaps that you can partner with your neighboring country, and together you can add value, create job regionally, and then before exporting. Because typically developing countries have been exporting the primary fish, but processed fish have much more revenues to then create more jobs, more value added. So this is another area that we're looking at, how to ensure that you add value before they're exported. I had another point which just escapes me. And it's looking at that whole chain, because it's complex, right? And then we're also helping, for instance, we did a mapping of NDCs from 60 developing countries, and we find that only 15 of them consulted with their trade ministries, but very few of them use trade as a tool trade is a mean of implementation. It's a very important tool for developing countries, for all countries, but especially for developing countries, for domestic resource mobilization, because it's one large source of revenue for developing countries, and yet it's not used. So we developed a guide for policymakers on how to use trade and investment in their NDCs. So, for instance, we did a pilot in the Gambia, and basically we look at all their export, all their import, we look at their priority for the NDCs, and then with their trade and environmental ministries and the sectoral ministries, they decided that adding value to fisheries was one of their top priority, but they want to add value to fisheries using renewable energy so that it can be certified as sustainable fisheries, right? And so basically now we've developed that, we've looked at what's the investment needed, what's the capacity building needed, and now we're going to find, we're looking for funding to support the Gambia to put that in place. So that's a concrete example.
I think I'm done. Do you have any?